After selling over 5.3 million online by age 24, I thought I would share my story with you guys. At the apartment here today on the rooftop, nobody is here. It is, I believe it's Friday. Sometimes I don't even know what day it is anymore, right? But I mean, I guess if you work remote, you kind of have this freedom, right? Let me move the camera a little bit. But how did I get started? Back on social media, how did I get started with remote triaging? How did I, learn these skills that are quite effective here in 2025? So to give you guys some context, I went to a Montessori school. If you guys aren't familiar with what Montessori is, it's a very hands-on learning, right? We had something called the golden beads. So from an early age, I was really into numbers, really into statistics, right? And it was really interesting because in all my classes, I could choose, right? It wasn't hey, there's a history class, there's a math class, there's a drawing class, an art class, whatever. In Montessori, you could choose the stuff that you learn on a daily basis. So I would literally just do numbers, right? I would play with what they called the golden beads, and you would count. So for example, they would give you kind of these prompts. So it'd be hey, what's 567, right? And it would be these 5 of these, big stacks of beads. So it'd be big squares of beads with 100 beads each. So it'd be 5 of those, right? And then you have 10 beads on it was essentially a golden line, right? So it'd be 7 of those, and then 6 of the mini beads, right? And I would just count all the time kind of growing up. I was really into numbers. And when I started growing up, I had, just a few friends, honestly. I never had a ton of friends growing up. And I still feel I only really have a few close acquaintances. I think that's how I prefer it. But it was so interesting because as I grew up, a lot of my friends started playing video games. So I thought video games were interesting because it's a lot like business, right? In business, there's the end goal, right? Whether it's to serve your customers, whether it's to make more money, right? And it's kind of the same with video games, right? We played Call of Duty quite a bit, played this game called Destiny, and there was always some sort of mission, some sort of outcome that we were seeking towards, right? Whether that was we were solo missions or on a team. And it was very similar to business, but it was funny because on our Xbox at home, I was 13, and my parents didn't want to get me an Xbox, but they were hey, all your friends have an Xbox, I guess we'll do this, but you have to have a time limit, right? So it was a 60-minute time limit. And I would always try to find ways to get around this time limit. But Xbox, their parental controls were pretty good, and I just couldn't ever figure out the password. But then I was talking to my parents. I was hey, how can I play video games for more than just 60 minutes, right? How can I play games for more time? And they told me, at first they weren't really open to it at all, right? They wouldn't let me play video games for more than 60 minutes a day, which was pretty good, honestly, at the time. But at some point I convinced them. And the way I convinced them was, hey, if I can find a way to make money from video games, is this something that you would let me, do more of, essentially, right? So I asked them, hey, if I can find a way to make money playing video games, will you let me play, right? Just as much as I want, essentially. And at first they weren't really open to it, but I started a YouTube channel, right? So I started a YouTube channel when I was 14. It was called Noble Warrior 99. I probably won't put it up on screen since I don't really want to edit this video, but you can search that and you'll see it, and I'll link it in the description as well. But I had a video game channel and ended up making probably over 500 videos, went to a bunch of midnight releases for games, right? And through that process, I fell in love with creating content, right? Not so much because of the content itself, but because I found a way to almost manufacture virality, right? And it was a mix of tapping into trends, so new releases within the video games, right? Whenever something new came out, I would wake up, before school at 4 a.m. on Tuesdays, I think Thursdays and Friday, because there were new things that came out in the games that I was making videos on. And I would wake up, I'd post the first video, and I knew that, hey, if I could post first before any other creator, right, I would be able to make money through AdSense, essentially, right? So made a bunch of videos. I had, one of the videos ended up getting featured in Forbes when I was 15. I think it was called Hadium Flake Farming, right? It was showing people how to essentially like farm these hadium flakes inside this video game Destiny. But it was so interesting because I fell in love with the numbers. I hated all my classes in high school, honestly, except for like one or two teachers. They were like incredible. But it was funny because I would fall asleep in like all my classes, and the only way I would stay up during my classes was from the dopamine from refreshing my YouTube stats, right? So that was like so fascinating to me, just because of that whole game. Um, Ended up writing like a bunch of my college essays about Destiny, about the YouTube channel, and ultimately how it helped me overcome a stutter. Right. Sometimes you guys might even notice when I'm talking, like sometimes there's like a slight stutter. I was definitely more introverted growing up, but I had a really bad stutter when I was like age 12. And I think YouTube was really powerful for me because it helped me overcome that. Right. And then obviously running the company we do now, Modern SDR, teaching people sales, right? That's also helped me get out of my comfort shell quite a bit. I mean, we have close to probably about 600 people in our main program, and then like almost about 1,900 members collectively with all of the programs that we actually have. So that's been really cool to see. But I definitely feel like I've been getting out of my comfort zone more, which has just been incredible. So that's a big thing there. But long story short, I wrote my college essays about that. I went to Vanderbilt University, and it was a very different shift, right? I grew up normal middle class. Parents were always there for me. Their parents are still there for me. They're amazing. But it was interesting to go to Vanderbilt, where the majority, I think like top 25% of the school, like 25%, 1 in 4 people, they're from the top 1% of all like the wealth in America. And I think that's over like $1 million now, in terms of like earnings. I'm not sure what those like percentages are, but then 4% of the school is in the top 0.1%, right? So it's a lot of, I mean, like literally the Vanderbilts, right? Like that's Vanderbilt University, right? So I met, a few people that were like part of that family, and it was such a different way of viewing money and viewing wealth, and it was so interesting. And what I realized kind of throughout university was that trading time for money, like a lot of these the wealthiest kids, right? The the wealthiest kids weren't necessarily smarter, but they had either better connections and they were taught to leverage better opportunities, right? The reality about lower class and middle class people is that they're not educated, right, to pursue higher leverage opportunities, right? If you're working a job paying you $25 an hour, that's not very leveraged, right? Let's say you work 10 hours a day, you make $250 a day, and then you have to work six days a week, right? So that's 60. That's 6 days a week, so 60 hours, right? And then you might make $1,250. But then after taxes takes everything, at the end of the month, you're maybe left with like $3,000 to $4,000, right? What Vanderbilt taught me, and the people, and more importantly, the people that went to Vanderbilt, what I learned from them and learned from their families, and everything like that, was that in order to actually build wealth long term, you have to remove time as a variable for what you're paid, right? What I realized through Vanderbilt University is that if I wanted to actually build wealth, if I wanted to gain riches, if I wanted to actually build something for myself long term, I could never trade this limited asset of time, right? Trading time for money was something that would not work for me if I wanted to build real wealth. And that's where I see a lot of people get stuck, is that they're on this hamster wheel of continuing to trade time for dollars. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that unless you want to actually build wealth and get rich, right? Because you are limited on the amount of time that you actually have. So what I realized at Vanderbilt was that, hey, there's only really 2 things in this world that can have actual uncapped earning potential, right? Kind of through this whole YouTube channel, I learned marketing, right? So I got really good at marketing. And then, I started a business in college because I realized that, hey, working a normal job would never get me to the life that I wanted to live in, right? But going back to the 2 points, the only 2 things in this world that can get you paid for your value and not your hours, right, is either starting a business, which the majority of people will never have success with. I've seen literally hundreds of people over the last 3 years launch a business, fail the business, they go back to their normal job, right? So starting a business is out of the picture for most people, but learning a skill like sales, right, where you're paid on your value, right, not the hours that you're actually spending, right? Maybe you know, it doesn't matter if a sale takes you 10 hours or it takes you 30 minutes, you're paid the same, right? If you're helping sell a $20,000 product, right, and you help, you know, maybe it's an online course, online program, something like that, right? Well, if you make 10% per sale on that, that's $2,000 for quite literally just taking one phone call. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that, right? So because I had this massive experience with marketing, right? I have 4 years of marketing experience, hands-on since like the age of 14. I then took that, right? I realized that sales was this incredible skill. Like when I was about 19 years old, I realized that sales, which we call now remote triaging, and you guys have probably seen this term, you know, being thrown around a lot, either on Instagram with us or some of the ads that we run or things like that, right? But I realized that the skill of sales, this is what would allow me to really scale my income, right? And of course, now I run a business because I've been doing this for 11 years, right? But I realized that sales, you know, all businesses need sales. Without sales, businesses will not thrive. Businesses will not be able to survive, right? So I realized that if I could sell, I would always have a job, right? I would always have a way to produce income for myself, my family, my loved ones in any economy, no matter what happened, right? Whether something good or bad, you know, was happening to myself or my situation, I knew that if I learned this skill set of sales, I would always be okay, right? And I'm so thankful having graduated from Vanderbilt, right? It was like the 14th ranked school in the United States, right? But I learned from all of these, you know, other kids, hey, it's not so much about the boat, right? It's not so much about how hard you're rowing in whatever opportunity you're in. It's about what opportunity vehicle you're actually in, right? If your goal is to make $100,000 a year, but you're rowing, right? You're rowing our metaphorical boat, which is, you know, the time that we spend, right, in an opportunity that can only make you $60,000 a year. It's going to be pretty fucking difficult to get, right, to making $100K a year. You have to be in a different opportunity, and for me, that opportunity vehicle was sales, right? Now, once I mastered marketing, I learned how to hire team members. I learned the skill set of sales. Yeah, I launched my own business, and now we run the Modern SDR, right? We run a sales training program to actually help people, maybe even like yourself watching this video, right? Transition away from this old model of trading time for money, but instead trading their value for money, right? So started with YouTube, right? I learned how to, you know, go viral, how to generate attention, right? Launch an agency, you know, during university, right? And through that, with my skills of marketing, with my skills of sales, being able to talk to people and actually close deals, right? I remember it was like January 15th, 2000. I think it was 2020. It might have been 2021. It was January 15th though, and I was either 20 or 21 years old. And I remember getting a $10,000 wire. It was another, I think it was like another $5,000 wire, and it was like $1,500. And I remember that day being like, fuck. So, funny enough, my mic died. But it was kind of at that point that I realized that, hey, you know, I could never go work for, you know, never go to a 9 to 5 ever again. You know, really since that day, you know, that I made, from 3 of those sales, I realized that, you know, this skill set of sales is life changing, right? If someone is able to learn the skill set of sales, they can change the complete trajectory of their life. And that's ultimately what, you know, stemmed into the Modern SDR, into the sales training program that we've developed, and it's been really cool being able to help, you know, people from all around the world, you know, take these steps and, you know, invoke a lot of positive change in their life. So I hope this story, this kind of background on me and whatnot is inspiring to you. And I think having graduated from a school like Vanderbilt, it taught me a lot about wealth. It taught me a lot about how, you know, top 1% think. It's the only limited resource that we have in this world. So if we can find a way to provide more value, we can think there's a lot of changes going on in this economy now, right? Obviously, artificial intelligence is huge. I think write prompts well. I think we do quite well. There's not many people that can do it at a high level, though. Right? So that's very difficult to get into. I think people that understand human psychology at a very deep level excel with marketing. I think they can do very well. And then people with sales. Right? I think sales is the simplest skill to learn, but also one of the most impactful, and that's why I'm so passionate about teaching it. I think the majority of people will never have success becoming marketers and probably won't have success becoming like AI prompt designers. But I think sales is something tangible that a lot of people can tap into, and that's why I'm so passionate about it. I did put together a 7-hour free course about remote triaging and online sales. You can check it out. I hope you guys did get some value though from this video. Share with a friend. Let me know too if you guys like these raw style videos. Sadly, I had like some just banger stuff that I felt like I was saying in that other recording I had, but sadly we lost that. So you guys are stuck with this version of me. But anyways, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy. We're gonna go. It's Friday here, about like 2 p.m. I'm gonna go enjoy some of the day, and we'll talk soon. Okay.